Thank you, Ruben. That was awe-inspiring. Wow, what a wonderful way to open our service today. Good morning and welcome to Unitarian Universalist Church West. Welcome to this community of compassionate, creative, and courageous individuals who come together in search of a greater connection to all that is. Every one of us is encouraged to discover, express, and share our unique gifts with each other and our world. My name is Deb Ruesch, and I'm a member of the worship ministry team. It is good to be here with you today, leading this online service. If you are new to Unitarian Universalist Church West, we want to give you an extra special welcome. Checking out a new spiritual community is an act of bravery, even during this time of virtual church. We would love to connect with you and encourage you to leave us a message at visitor@uucw.org if you're interested in learning more about our vibrant spiritual community. Now, I'd like to introduce those individuals who have contributed to this service. Thank you to members Jeannie Baker, Heather Bartlett, and Leslie Peterson. I'd also like to recognize who you just heard, Unitarian Universalist Church West Music Director Ruben P. Reinen, and lead music director Jennifer Nicolosi for our music today. Thanks also to Dave Cicero, our director of Lifespan Education, for providing today's worship for all ages, to Vicky Banville, don't know why that's a tongue twister this morning. She's our church administrator. I want to thank her for her assistance behind the scenes, and literally behind the scenes working with us today, making sure all of this is as seamless as possible, is our wonderful Kelly Bogner, our publications coordinator. Of course, a very special thank you goes out. I think you just heard my cat wailing in the background. A very special thank you goes out to our pulpit guest this morning, Minister-to-be Matt Aspin. Matt earned his Master's of Divinity degree from Meadville Lombard Theological School and was granted preliminary fellowship by the Ministerial Fellowship Committee. He will soon be ordained by his home congregation in West Seattle, Washington. Matt is currently residing in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and recently accepted a position as the interim minister of religious exploration for the Auburn UU Fellowship in Alabama, where he will be serving remotely for the remainder of the 2021 church year. On behalf of our congregation and guests who have come together this morning, we welcome and thank you for being here with us today, Matt. And we thank all of you for being with us today. Please now join us for our chalice lighting.
Spring reminds us that the world is constantly becoming. Everything is in motion, changing and growing and maturing, or decaying and dying and fading away. Notice what is growing now. Notice what is fading now. May you find your own becoming in the middle of it all, and may the light of this chalice help us all as we continue becoming too.
And we have found and with the grace of age we share the wonder of youth, and we believe that growing is an answer. Our lives are full of wonder, and our time is very brief. The death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, the memories we shared with friends, they will linger on, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow, we have the gift to believe that peace within our living is an answer. We seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality, and blessed peace of mind. And then we come together here to make sense of what we find, and we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a joy being together. And in our search for peace, maybe we'll finally see, even to question truly is an answer.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was so beautiful. We appreciate you leading us in that hymn. And please join me now in welcoming Dave Cicero with our worship for all ages.
Good morning. I began my search for something to share with you today, thinking about Unitarian Universalism being a living tradition. That is, something that passes existing ideas and values from one group to another. That's the tradition part, while still continuing to change and evolve with the times. And that's the living part. The author of The Little Prince apparently describes traditions and ceremonies as the ways we hand down to our children and to the next generation the meaning of our lives. Now, I grew up in a family with many traditions. Some were connected with national or religious holidays, while others were unique to our Italian-American family. And I wouldn't be surprised if you told me that your family typically celebrates certain events in a particular way every year. To this day, my mom insists that each Thanksgiving meal include some dishes that I'm not sure anyone really enjoys, at least not more than they would an updated or substitute recipe. And growing up, I also confess that my siblings and I tended to roll our eyes whenever it was time to go to grandma's for dinner again, or celebrate another cousin's birthday, or dress up and go out for a holiday or any other number of events. Why can't we just stay home for once and do it differently? Was a question that I remember asking. Well, at least in my own head. I'm not sure I ever had the courage to say it out loud. Now, I think that it was my creative side, simply looking for new ways to do things. After all, there's value in that, right? In allowing the next generation to have a say in how things are done. One of my favorite authors, Wendell Berry, wrote a poem called The Larger Circle that invites us to clasp the hands of those that go before us and the hands of those who come after us, and to enter the little circle of each other's arms, joining our hands in a dance with the larger circle of all creatures, passing in and out of life. I think Barry is telling us that both the old and the new have value, but together they make each other richer. Connecting across the generations is an old world value that I wonder we might consider reinstating more often. Yes, we need to stake our own place in the world too. What if we, older and younger, interacted more? And maybe you already do. I wish I was better at remembering the stories of our past. Tradition helps communicate those and other important messages too, like being able to count on family and the power of love. A book I discovered this month illustrates the idea of passing on these same values, but recognizes that they evolve too over time. It's called Love and the Rocking Chair, written by Leo and Diane Dillon. I won't read the whole thing today, but it's published by the Blue Sky Press, an imprint of Scholastic Books. The story begins with a young couple searching for new furniture while awaiting the birth of their child. They find a sturdy rocking chair. It provides a place for song, for story, and for play, until it's eventually forgotten about. And the family members grow older and move on. Eventually, though, the baby, now a young adult, invites another loved person into the family, and they rediscover the rocking chair. Still functional, holding wonderful memories with potential for still more. The grandmother rocks in it, singing softly to the new baby, who later uses it for their own creative play. As time passes and lives change, love, like the rocking chair, is the constant. These characters counted on family members for strength and support and hope in an uncertain, frightening world. I'm fortunate and even occasionally take for granted that I can do the same. But I also count on my religious community. I'm grateful to know that here I can find truth and meaning that will outlast any temporary setbacks. Who or what do you count on? And do you expect those things to remain constant, or do you allow them to change with the times also? I understand the comfort that comes in knowing what's coming next, especially for those who experience anxiety at too many changes or unknowns. And we have a lot of unknowns these days. When will it be safe to hug friends and family again, or spend a whole day with them indoors? When can worship or RE classes take place again in person? How and when will everything become normal again? Wendell Berry's poem earlier suggests that we move together in a dance to a music so subtle and vast that no ear hears it except in fragments. We're continually coming into new time and new being. The events of the past year came about suddenly and created a sharp contrast for us, making that newness pretty shocking. Having some constant keeps us grounded. And new ideas, new perspectives, new ways of doing, while difficult to accept at first, continue to keep things fresh and relevant. It's that combination of tradition and novelty that I value in our community and in our living tradition. and I now invite you to settle in for more Sunday worship elements, some familiar, some perhaps new.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see faces in each other's eyes, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Good morning, Church West. It is very good to be with you here this morning. As we begin to settle ourselves into the deeper part of this worship, I invite you to close your eyes if that feels comfortable. Ground yourself in your seat if that feels comfortable. And I'm going to share some words, which I would invite you to reflect upon as we prepare to move deeper into this service. This is called A Prayer for Compassion by Elizabeth Tarbox. Spirit of life, I give thanks for the opportunities to love that present themselves in the turmoil of life. Where the light catches the tears in another's eyes, where hands are held and there are moments without words, let us be present then and alive to the possibility of changing. Let us seek to make another's well-being the object of our concern. Let us seek to be present to another's pain, to bathe another's wounds, hear another's sadness, celebrate another's successes, and allow the other's story to change our own. Let us stand in the morning on damp grass, hear the syllables of birdsong, and fill up on sweet air that rolls over oceans and continents. Let us look up at the stars and the planets that fill the night sky with majesty. Let us witness the first fresh buds of spring amid the brown sticks of winter. And for all of this, let us be grateful. Let us not defend ourselves against the discomfort of unruly emotion, nor seek to close down our hearts for fear a new love will come to shake our foundations. Let us instead be open to discovering a new way of seeing an old problem, or appreciating the perfection of a seashell, or the possibility of friendship. For in giving ourselves to what we do not understand, we receive life's blessings, and in taking care of another, we are cared for.
When the ground drops out from under you and there's nothing there to hold on to, no, you're not the first to fall right through to a space of mystery, a place of questioning who you are and who you're meant to be. When you can't find home where it used to be, and your roots have faded into memory, no, you're not alone in this new reality. It's a well-trod path traveled by ancestors who came before and show the way. Throughout time, we've been pushed into the dark, called to find the light within our broken hearts and let it shine. And we can't do it on our own, gotta find our family in the unknown. And side by side we'll go by stepping stone till the journey becomes our home. Some days it feels like searching for water in the sand. Sometimes it feels like falling with nowhere to land. Yeah, there are ups and downs that'll turn you round and round. We come back to the footprints, they're all around. And throughout time, we've been pushed into the dark, called to find the light within our broken hearts and let it shine. And we can't do it on our own, gotta find our family in the unknown. And side by side we'll go by stepping stone till the journey becomes our home. When the walls are closing in, we find our way out through the door into a light that's so much brighter than our hearts have known before. When we heed the call to follow the voice that burns within our core, we join the ranks of seekers, wanderers, and warriors of the soul. And throughout time, we've been pushed into the dark, called to find. Throughout time, we've been pushed into the dark, called to find the light within our broken hearts and let it shine. And we can't do it on our own, gotta find our family in the unknown. And side by side we'll go by stepping stone till the journey becomes, yes, the journey becomes our
Thank you so much to James Underberg for sharing his beautiful song with us today. Those lyrics are so relevant and pertinent to probably what all of us, many of us, are feeling. Today's reading is titled Marginal Wisdom and was written by the Reverend Leslie Takahashi. They teach us to read in black and white, Truth is this, the rest is false. You are whole or broken. Who you love is acceptable or not. Life tells its truth in many hues. We are taught to think in either or, to believe the teachings of Jesus or Buddha, to believe in human potential or a power beyond a single will. I am broken or I am powerful. Life embraces multiple truths, speaks of both and of and. We are taught to see in absolutes, good versus evil, male versus female, old versus young, gay versus straight. Let us see the fractions, the spectrum, the margins. Let us open our hearts to the complexity of our worlds. Let us make our lives sanctuaries to nurture our many identities. The day is coming when all will know that the rainbow world is more gorgeous than monochrome, that a river of identities can ebb and flow over the static, stubborn rocks in its course, that the margins hold the center.
Four weeks ago, I began a 4 to 6 month contract human resources gig, working remotely at a small nonprofit in Seattle. Prior to that, I spent 5 years of my life and have amassed like $70,000 in debt attending a UU Seminary, one of the preeminent training grounds for leadership in what we like to claim is our cutting edge, progressive, liberal faith tradition. I'm here to tell you today that I have already learned more in my first 4 weeks in this organization about what it truly means to be a leader in a multiracial, intentionally inclusive organization than I have in the entirety of my preparations prior to this. Let that sink in. I promised to talk today about the future of our denomination, and I think my experience over these past 4 weeks is as instructive as anything I could have mustered on my own when I thought up the title for this sermon a little over 2 months ago. I am dying to share the specifics of all that I've experienced so far in this nonprofit. But as you might imagine, I'm contractually prohibited from sharing too much of their specific processes. So I'll speak as generally as I can while still trying to maintain the essence of the story I'm trying to share here. But let me begin by saying that every single thing that I have experienced since day one leaves absolutely no question in my mind that this organization prioritizes the creation of a safe, multiracial, multicultural, inclusive, and equitable world in every action that it takes. And I can tell you that because of this, it feels like no organization that I've ever had the privilege of being a part of in the past, including our denomination. Now, before I go much further into any discussion about the future of our denomination, it's perhaps a good idea to consider where we are in this moment in history. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip the full story of how our denomination became what it is today. But suffice to say that ours has evolved as a living tradition where we believe that revelation is not sealed. This has created for us a faith tradition which is designed to adapt to the world as it changes, while seeking to maintain a timeless foundation, grounded in the realities of what it means at the core to be humans striving to survive together in community. So how is the world changing? I bet you have some ideas of your own. I see at least 4 major challenges we will need to confront today if we are to have any hope of providing a brighter future for our children than many of them are looking forward to now. First, despite the early promises of the internet, it's becoming obvious that technology has reinforced our tribal tendencies and splintered us into ever tighter and tighter silos. As our definition of us continues to shrink, the lines between us and them continue to deepen and become almost impenetrable. Many of us, see, there it is, us and them thinking is so embedded. Many of us are breathing a sigh of relief that the politics of hope won the last presidential election. But we cannot bury our heads in the sand and believe that the politics of division and fear has been eradicated for good. If anything, this past few months has shown us that the feelings that fuel this kind of movement are stronger than ever, than anyone could have guessed, both in this country and around the world. Even if we believe that that ideology is currently losing ground, recent legal moves demonstrate that those that seek to win through domination have no intention of letting go of their power. And although progress is being made, the marginalized in our world don't feel much safer today than they did before the equal rights legislation was passed back in the 60s. Black parents still have to have the talk about staying safe when pulled over by the police, and for valid reason, as we see in the news every day. For our faith to remain a meaningful voice in this conversation, at a minimum, we have got to create a space where everyone feels safe. And although the Unitarian Universalist Association, the UUA, and some congregations like this one are expressing commitment to move in this direction, from what I have seen in my travels across our denomination, we are not collectively there yet. Speaking of the UUA, a second reality of our times that needs to be addressed is a deep-seated resistance to the mandates coming from larger organizations. The seductive drive towards individual freedom runs deep within the fabric of our country, on both sides of the political aisle. If you doubt this, I challenge you to consider how many times you end up disagreeing with something I say this morning, and how eager you are to challenge my point. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a truth that impacts our society and needs to be accounted for as we consider our best ways forward. The way it is currently manifesting in our denomination, though, has an enormous cost, because there remains a loud and vocal contingent that is actively disagreeing with the direction the UUA is taking. I do not currently feel comfortable blindly recommending checking out UUism to everyone that I meet, especially those with marginalized identities, because I can't guarantee that they won't be at some risk of experiencing some level of trauma depending on where their local congregation is on the journey that I'm describing today. And that is a huge anchor holding us back. At the same time, we also seem to have lost our ability to have honest, productive conversations, uncomfortable conversations, with those who hold different ideas, opinions, or beliefs than ours. And problems that are known but not spoken of directly always become a cancer in the system. If Unitarian Universalism is to remain a relevant container, capable of holding the difficult conversations about the best way forward, we've got to get better at having safe, honest, respectful, productive conversations with those that hold different opinions than our own. The existence of a place where we all feel at least fairly confident that we are able to collectively and responsibly work towards agreements about what is generally true and supportive of all beings is needed more in our world than perhaps ever in history. Third, the extractive foundations of capitalism are rushing us towards an ecological disaster that our children already sense will likely mean the end of the fairy tale stories upon which the American dream has been predicated. This is one of the drivers of that resistance to large systems of power I mentioned. Folks know that the system is too big to ever change itself and are seeking new ways forward to ensure more equitable and sustainable distribution of our planet's finite resources. If our faith is to remain a relevant voice for justice, we have got to be willing to challenge the current systems that exist, even those that currently provide us with individual safety and comfort. Perhaps those systems most of all. And finally, number 4, to have the reserves needed to confront deeply embedded challenges, we need a strength of will that seems to have been lost. History and the sources of our faith tradition reminds us that this work requires a spiritual depth that we seem to have set aside, If Unitarian Universalism is to retain the strength it needs to be a meaningful change agent in the world, it must be willing to re-examine the vital role that connection to our spiritual grounding plays in our lives. So, how might all of that inform the future of Unitarian Universalism? The principles of our liberal faith remain more needed than ever, but it's becoming clear that what got us here will not get us there. So what does that look like? Let me now tell you what that looks like in the organization I am working with, because I think this offers a real-world glimpse into what our denomination needs to continue to remain relevant in the future. Consider how the organization I referred to at the opening is operating, and compare that to the current state of how things are done in this congregation, and then in our movement as a whole. You are doing so many things well, better than many I've seen, in fact. But there's always opportunity for consideration of new ways of being in this faith. If you hear something that seems like a good idea, commit to seeing how you might bring this new way of being to life in this community. This is the power of our faith. It is designed to change, and you get to be the change agents. The nonprofit I'm serving has embedded the changes they hope to see in the world directly into every single process they have. Let me share just a couple of things I've experienced. Before I even started, they sent me a link and said that they wanted me to complete an intercultural inventory, which I know comes with dedicated consultants and a review, and costs several $1,000s. And I immediately sent back and I said, "Are you sure you want me to do this? I'm just a contractor. I'm not going to be there long." And the answer came quickly. Yes, of course. You're going to be interacting with the folks in our organization, and we want to make sure that everyone goes into that aware and is mindful of what they need to do to help keep everyone safe. My first week included 8 hours of training about their culture, about racial equity, about trauma-informed practices. Creating a safe, multicultural, equitable, inclusive space is not just an aspiration for them on a PowerPoint slide. They embed their intention into every action they take. During that training, we talked about the SMART acronym for SMART goals. And they added a couple of other letters, SMART-E, to include inclusive and equitable, and took us through examples of what it really looked like to add that lens to your goals. And it was transformative to me how quickly you could see the blind spots in any goal that you had started to write. In that first week, they also had their quarterly all-staff meeting. This nonprofit, one of their communities they serve are tribal lands in the Pacific Northwest. The first half hour of that all-staff meeting was handed over to a member of that community with no agenda. They were given the space to share whatever they wanted to share. And they chose to share several songs they sang for us with drums. They shared the fact that her grandfather had died, who was the leader of their tribe, their tribal entity, and several other pieces, which really gave us a sense of who this person was and who her community was. This was the all-staff meeting. The entire organization sat and listened to this and gave this person the floor. They're changing their relationships with funders. They don't accept money from anyone that doesn't allow them to take the direction of the community that they are serving, and instead tries to instill outcomes from above. My boss said, "We invite conversations that might not be welcomed in other organizations." I could go on for an hour. Suffice to say, this organization embeds everything that it does with its intention of creating the world that it wants to see. It is not always comfortable. It is very rarely easy. but anything worth doing very rarely is. How might this look for your congregation? I believe that is your ongoing work to consider. And I know you're already doing a lot of this work. We continue to follow the leads offered by our denomination or resources like the Widening the Circle of Concern project. There are examples everywhere and more being shared every day. The UUA has added an ongoing requirement of continuing education for ministers, which is long overdue. Reverend Tandy Rogers, at a recent ordination ceremony I attended, recommended considering adding a certain number of hours of continuing education each year as a requirement of ongoing membership. The world continues to rapidly change. We would be well served to consider embedding new practices like the ones I've shared above into everything we do to ensure we keep up with it. No individual and no community gets it right every time. But what I have learned and experienced in my first few weeks in this nonprofit is that because of the foundation that has been set, I am safe. I was told and have experienced through modeling by the leadership that I am safe to prioritize my own needs for health over the needs of the constant busyness. I'm safe bringing mistakes I see to the people that might benefit from these reminders that there may be a better way to communicate something that might pose less risk of creating harm, even to the person that holds positional power over me. Because at the foundation of this work is a series of principles, perhaps not written down, but communicated in every single act that this organization strives to take. There's an unspoken grounding in the inherent worth and dignity of each individual in all the ways that this organization seeks to be in the world. Perfection is not expected, but vulnerability and humility most certainly are. My training prepared me well enough to pass the gatekeeper and get into the door. Prior to stepping into this system, I thought I had done a lot of work, even though I always knew I had a ways to go. Now I can see just how far that distance actually is. It's a never-ending journey. My new boss and my new team remind me constantly that there is no finish line. This journey, with its heavy cross to bear if you choose it, is never-ending. But it may just be the path to universal salvation in this lifetime that we who profess universalist ideals ultimately need to pick up and either begin to or continue to carry if we are to be viewed as true allies on this walk. What then must we do? I've already experienced a couple of shifts within myself as a result of having begun partnering with this organization. I think you can hear it in my voice. I've become deeply committed at a personal level to ensuring this organization succeeds. Not just for myself, but because I can tangibly feel that by being connected to this organization, I am contributing to work that will make the world a better place. Not just theoretically, but in tangible, far-reaching ways. This organization and others like it are leading the way. And I intend to have what I've learned here informed my leadership practices and all of my future ministerial efforts. This is the level of certainty and passion that our chosen faith tradition will need to instill within each of us if we are to remain a potent source for good in this world for future generations. My friends, this is my first time visiting with you. Although I know both Suzelle and your new Assistant Minister of Pastoral Care, Denise, very well. They've both told me how much work your community has already done and is continuing to do towards the ends I have been describing here this morning. What I can't see is how fully you are embracing it, how relevant each of you believe this work truly is, or how much resistance there is to the whole direction in the first place. If you are like every other community I've visited, the truth is that there is a wide variety of perspectives contained here. Because we UUs are nothing, if not an independently minded bunch who resists anything that feels like a mandate from above. We each are where we are. We will each journey as we journey. But from my perspective, there are some ideas where we need to be willing to put aside our individualism and be willing to proclaim loudly and consistently that there are some places where we recognize that ceding some of our individual comforts and positional power for the long-term benefit of the collective good is both preferable and required at this moment in history. The biggest thing I have learned, not only in this organization, but in every other BIPOC, LGBTQI, and other space where I have been granted the honor of invitation behind the protective walls, is that the number one priority for folks with marginalized identities that have been harmed over countless generations by those with positional power is the primacy of safety. Without intentional, embedded, long-term evidence of practices designed to ensure safety, there is no chance for vulnerable, honest relationships between any us's or them's. And that is what our society needs more than anything else to heal our wounds if we are to have any hope for collective salvation. To close out my time here today, I'd like to share a story, again, one that I first heard at this nonprofit, that illustrates why I think the path I've seen and shared today is the path I would encourage everyone to consider stepping onto and journeying together. Back in the 60s, Berkeley, California had become host to a growing population of differently abled people, including folks with specific paralysis due to spinal cord injuries, cerebral palsy, and polio. In a time before government mandated accessibility requirements, these folks centered around a special dormitory, the only building on campus that could somewhat easily accommodate wheelchair use. The rebellious spirit of the 60s was infectious, and this community began lobbying hard for city designers to include a newer, rarely included sidewalk feature called a curb cut into its plans. Throughout the early 70s, the city built the first planned wheelchair accessible route in the United States, creating the physical foundation for one of the largest and most active communities of differently abled people in America. So that all sounds lovely. But do you know what else happened as a result of that effort to supposedly support the requested needs of one specific demographic? Everyone else in the community began to realize just how much better life was for them because of the enhancements that had been made. Parents pushing strollers, workers pushing heavy carts to work sites, delivery folks wheeling dollies with tall stacks of packages, travelers wheeling heavy suitcases. Everyone in the community benefited because intentional actions were taken to better accommodate one group that expressed its challenges and articulated what support it needed to be successful. That's how this works. The solutions to challenges don't come from those without the challenge. They need to come from the folks that are experiencing the challenges at a visceral level every day. That's why we need to listen to the solutions proposed by those whose voices have been and continue to be silenced. That is why today I believe specifically that BIPOC voices need to be finally amplified and embedded into the fabric of future planning conversations. That's why this work is important. And that's why this is everybody's work. Our society is currently built on a model of competition and dominion over. But a better model is emerging. I've seen it. And I believe it provides the map we need to follow if we are to ever find our way to the promised land. As for the future of our denomination, this work is happening right now in this world. It is being led by the marginalized. It is being embraced by the UUA. It is becoming expected by younger generations. Our chalice emerged as a symbol of safe harbor from the Nazis during World War II. Our challenge today is to ensure that this chalice continues to serve as an honest beacon of truly safe harbor for all that seek a spiritual refuge in this beautiful, but oftentimes scary world. I hope you will join me in the never-ending effort to intentionally widen the circle of Unitarian Universalism. What an amazing space this circle still has so much more potential to be. Blessed be, and may it be so. As you consider my words from today, now let us take a moment to consider the resources needed to keep this dream alive. Thank you.
UU Church West Split the Plate program is one of outreach and generosity. Each month we give half of all undesignated offerings to a nonprofit organization to help us live out our Unitarian Universalist values and serve our community. Hope Center of Waukesha has been providing the basic needs of financial assistance, food, clothing, and appliances in Waukesha County for more than 30 years. Support given at a crucial time in a person's life can prevent the downward spiral which often leads to homelessness. Whether it's a meal at their outreach meal program or day center, like new clothing from their clothing shop or financial aid, all is provided free of charge and delivered in a respectful and welcoming manner. What started in 1987 as a small group of pastors from the Waukesha area has grown into a mission supported by area congregations, local businesses, and individuals. To support Hope Center of Waukesha anytime this month, go to UUCW's website Donate tab and select Split the Plate from the menu provided. Or you can text or mail your donation today using the information found here. Today I thank you for your generosity to Hope Center of Waukesha.
Thank you, Heather, so very much. And thank you to everyone for putting together today's service, especially to our passionate and wonderful soon-to-be Reverend Matt Aspin. And many thanks to all of you, our kind and caring congregation and guests, for all that you so generously give to sustain the work of this congregation and of our world. In closing, I would like to leave with you these words penned by the Reverend Eric Walker Wickstrom. It is titled, "The Purpose of This Community is to Help Its People Grow." If you are who you were, and if the person next to you is who he or she was, if none of us has changed since the day we came in here, we have failed. The purpose of this community, of any church, temple, zendo, mosque, is to help people grow. We do this through encounters with the unknown, in ourselves, in one another, in the other, whoever that might be for us, however hard that might be, because these encounters have many gifts to offer. So may you go forth from here this morning, not who you were, but who you could be. So may we all. Namaste, amen, and blessings on your day.
Thank you.